Hello, everyone. Welcome back. The long awaited Phala Phala Farm Gate, the Constitutional Court judgment, the just now judgment has arrived finally. All right, before we go back to that judgment, Constitutional Court judgment, let me remind you what it is. A Phala Phala. When you see South Africans doing a meme of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa sitting in his couch with a lot of US dollar being stashed in his couch, is the Phala Phala Farm Gate. Phala Phala Farm Gate refers to a burglary that occurred in South African's private farm. The farm is called Phala Phala. That burglary robbery that happened in his farm. So it's apparently February 2020, money was stolen from Cyril Ramaphosa's farm. The head of state security at the time, Arthur Fraser, alleged that it was around 4 million US dollars, around 60 million rand, that was not declared, undeclared foreign currency stashed in Cyril Ramaphosa's couch. Um, so yeah, then this amount, apparently they did manage to get this amount somehow, some of it, and then later it was reduced to 580,000. So it's very hard for me to make a very conclusive and say and claim this amount was 4 million, or to say this amount is 580,000. The reason why it would be harder for me to say that is because this amount was not reported to the police. So we're just relying on people, the witnesses, and the people who worked in the security cluster at the time, that this amount was a 4 million. But Cyril say it was 580,000. So it was revised down to 580,000. Nonetheless, to hold that kind of cash in your house, stashed in the couch, couch, it's illegal under South African law.
The votes that were left in the vote calculation. Applying the decision of this court in Genesis medical schemes versus register of medical schemes, the third judgment holds that once the rule is set aside, the votes taken under it cannot stand. The conclusion is this: the effect of the three judgments is as follows. This court unanimously finds that it has exclusive jurisdiction in respect of the challenge to the validity of Rule 129I. B, by a majority, finds that it does not have exclusive jurisdiction in respect of the challenge to the NA vote. C, by a majority, concludes that Rule 129I is inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid. D, by a majority, concludes that the NA vote is inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid. And E, by a majority, concludes that the report must be referred to the impeachment committee. As such, the following order is made. 1. This court has exclusive jurisdiction to hear the application with respect to the challenge to Rule 129I. 2. It is declared that Rule 129I of the 9th edition of the Rules of the National Assembly, the NA rules, is inconsistent with the Constitution, invalid, and it is set aside. 3. Pending any amendment, Rule 129I of the NA rules shall read as follows. Open quote. Rule 129I, heading Consideration and Referral of Panel Report 1. Once the panel has reported, the Speaker must inform the Assembly of the report. 2. The President must provide a copy of the report forthwith. 3. In the event the panel concludes that sufficient evidence exists as contemplated in Rule 129G, the matter must be referred to the impeachment committee established by this rule or by the National Assembly rules for that purpose. 4. In the event the panel concludes that sufficient evidence does not exist as contemplated in Rule 129G, the Speaker must schedule the report for consideration by the Assembly, and in the event the Assembly nonetheless resolves that a Section 89 subsection 1 inquiry be proceeded with, the matter must be referred to the impeachment committee established by this rule or by the National Assembly rules for that purpose. 4. The severance and reading in paragraph 3 of this order shall apply subject to any amendment by the National Assembly. 5. Pending any amendment of any rules to the extent that any rules are by implication affected by the reading in paragraph 3 of this order.
So the Constitutional Court has ruled that the Parliament acted unconstitutional when it blocked the Section 89 impeachment process related to the Phala Phala scandal. Well, this is a major political and constitutional defeat for President Cyril Ramaphosa and for the ANC's 2022 parliamentary handling of the matter. The court essentially said that the parliament could not simply use its majority to shut down the impeachment pathway after the independent Section 89 panel found that there was a prima facie evidence of possible misconduct by the president, Cyril Ramaphosa. The National Assembly's December 2022 vote was inconsistent with the South African Constitution. It also found that the Section 89 panel report must now be referred back to the impeachment committee process. That means Cyril will face impeachment process. Okay? And because we now know now there's also an IP report in place, the also IP report is still confirming what was said by Arthur Fraser, that these people, they, started their own investigation. Okay, they kidnapped people. The IP report said. So there's a lot more report we have about this Phala Phala now, thanks to the ATM. That is constitutional significance, this actually finding, because it strengthened the principle that Parliament has a duty to hold the President accountable. Not because the President is certain of a certain political party, but to hold and respect the Constitution. Parliament cannot violate Constitution, not merely to protect the executive through party political voting. So this ruling suggests that the Constitution is supreme. Your majority is not going to make you protect you for doing things that are unconstitutional. This judgment also echoes earlier constitutional ruling during the Jacob Zuma era, where the court actually repeatedly found that the parliament failed in its oversight obligations. So politically, there are several things now. Several things now becomes really important here. Ramaphosa is not automatically going to be removed. We know that the court did not find him guilty of corruption or criminal conduct, but we have other reports that have suggested that the actions of his security cluster and him failing to report it was criminal, was illegal. So the court was not asked to ask that question. The court was asked to really say whether or not majority vote in parliament can conceal the president for acting unconstitutional. The ruling is about legality of parliament's conduct, the conduct of the parliament. That the parliament, they themselves, they need to uphold the constitution. The parliament must uphold the constitution. Whether the accountability process was unlawfully stopped, the accountability, responsible governance was abandoned in 2022 to protect Cyril Ramaphosa. The impeachment mechanism is revived. The parliament now has to process the Section 89 report properly. Now we have a GNU, don't you remember? Oh, we have DA. Now it's very interesting now to see whether DA is going to uphold its principle, whether they're going to protect illegality, whether they're going to proceed with impeachment. Okay, this creates a renewed scrutiny, possible hearings, and political exposures for GNU parties. Okay, because we're now going to see whether or not they are truthfully uphold and respect the Constitution. The politicians must uphold the Constitution. If they uphold the Constitution, we, the citizen, we will then uphold the Constitution. The Constitution is supreme above everyone. So in 2022, the ANC had a strong parliamentary majority. As I said, in 2026, the ANC is weak. Coalition politics matter, and parties like the DA now become strategically important because they have more seats than any other parties. But because no, they have seats. There's the second biggest seats they have, but other parties. There's the thing is in South Africa, it's so many parties. The DA is around 22%, but the other party, 30 something party, lies in the other smaller parties. Okay, so that's where the truth lies. So the DA, if the DA doesn't support it and the rest of the party support impeachment, Ramaphosa goes because they don't. The ANC cannot vote to actually protect him. Even if all of the ANC people vote and say, "Yeah, we protect the president," they don't have enough seats. They don't have enough votes. If the DA said no, we're not protecting criminality, and the other party said no, so Ramaphosa goes, get impeached. The National Assembly may remove the president for serious violation of the constitution or law, or serious misconduct or inability to perform the functions of the office. But the Constitution does not prescribe the detailed procedure for how the Parliament must determine whether the ground exists. And so the EFF had another case in the court that ruled that the parliament had failed to create a proper rules for presidential impeachment. This happened with under Zuma, Jacob Zuma. So under that, the same parliament had to create rules, Section 89 rules that fulfill the constitutional mandate. That means that they needed to actually to have a preliminary assessment mechanism in place, and the use of independent panel must be appointed by the speaker. They also, so that the panel is the creation of the parliamentary rules, and also not directly written into the constitution. So the parliament, in other ways, what I'm saying here is that the how this works, that the constitution mandates impeachment framework, then the parliament create the rules or the framework how this must be operationalized, and those rules must then be applied rational and consistently. The parliament cannot arbitrary and decide because we've got majority we're going to disregard a process designed to certify the constitutional obligations. This is similar to an administrative principle. Once we have an administrative principle process, once we have a lawful process exists, or the lawful process exists, decision makers cannot selectively abandon it without just decide they're going to abandon this without rational justification. That is why the court focused last on was this panel constitutional required. Having established this process, could Parliament lawfully ignore the prima facie finding without proper constitutional reasoning? So essentially, that's what is this all about. Section 89 is a mechanism by which a president could be removed. The Constitution provides the Parliament of ways in which they can actually, the reason why the president could be impeached, removed from Parliament. But the parliament, the legislator, needed to legislate and provide a framework on the rules, how this rule would be applied in order to certify Section 89. But you know what? They've abandoned it arbitrary. The Constitution had said that was unconstitutional, whether the parliament acted legally. And the Constitution has found that yes, the parliament was unlawful. That okay, then the parliament now will need to proceed with the Section 89 report properly, and they then will create another scrutiny for Cyril's conduct. And this time around, we know the parliament is a multi-party alliance, and the DA will be put on the spotlight now under this. Section 89 process cannot be treated as a symbolic political exercise. This is where the constitutional precedent comes in. That Section 89 process cannot be treated as a symbolic political exercise if Parliament receives a credible prima facie finding from an independent panel. It cannot irrationally terminate the process simply because the president commands party loyalty. That could fundamentally affect future president in South Africa. The accountability is inconsistent. So that's why here the very important thing about this judgment is that it reinforced one principle here, that Parliament cannot create an accountability mechanism and then irrationally ignore its outcomes for political convenience. Yes, the Constitution mandates impeachment framework. The Parliament creates rules to operationalize that framework. Those rules must then apply rationally and consistently. The Parliament cannot arbitrarily design or disregard a process it designed to certify constitutional obligations. Once lawful process exists, decision makers cannot selectively abandon it without rational justifications. That is the summary of this judgment. Is constitutional precedent. Phala Phala Farm Gate.